Senators reacted after a closed-door all-senators briefing on Syria with Defense Secretary James Mattis and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair General Joseph Dunford. Here's a look.
Briefing that I guess would assuage your concerns.
Okay, number one, I really appreciate the professional nature of our military. Those who performed these strikes did a very good job. The strategy is the total destruction of ISIS and combating the malign influence of Iran in Syria. I have a lot of misgivings about whether or not we can accomplish those goals. It seems to me that the president is going to pull out of Syria as soon as he can, and I believe ISIS can never be destroyed unless there's a credible holding force. And some Americans need to be part of that holding force, because if we learn nothing from Iraq, if you leave without an adequate holding force, they come back. My biggest concern is that the day we leave, the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are made up of Arabs and Kurds, are going to be exposed. I'm afraid that if we leave without some American presence, that Turkey will continue the fight against the Kurds, and you're going to wind up having people slaughtered who stood up to help America, and that means it's harder for us in the future to get somebody to help us. There is no military strategy on the table to deal with the malign influence of Iran and Russia. So what I think is going to happen is diplomacy will fail, that Assad, for all practical purposes, has won the civil war, and that what's going to happen inside of Syria is going to be an armed camp of Hezbollah and Iranian military people that will present a threat to Israel unlike any time in the last 20 or 30 years. So I support the goals of the destruction of ISIS. I don't think the strategy they have is going to lead to it. I support the goal of countering malign influence of Iran. I don't think we have a strategy that can do it. And if we stay on the course that we're on now, Syria will fall into the hands of the Russians, the Iranians, and Assad, which would be a nightmare for Israel and the region as a whole, and that our destruction of ISIS strategy is really not practical.
Did they talk about a timeline at all?
Conditions-based, but as soon as possible. And one of the conditions has to be, in my view, if you leave, how can you guarantee the safety of the Syrian Democratic Forces who joined the fight against ISIS, particularly the Kurds, because we've already had conflicts between Turkey and the Kurds involved, and Assad, if he could, would destroy these people also. Assad, if he could, would take the Syrian Democratic Forces that have worked with us and destroy them. So I worry that the people who've been there for us are going to be exposed when we leave, and one of the conditions for our leaving should be taking care of them, and I don't see how we legitimately do that anytime soon. And when it comes to countering Iran, it's pretty much all talk and no real strategy to achieve that goal.
Senator, McConnell has just said in an interview that under no uncertain terms he is not bringing the Mueller protection bill to the floor. What's your reaction?
That's his decision to make. I don't believe Mr. Mueller's in jeopardy of being fired. I wanted to do some institutional protections for special counsels now and in the future, but I respect Mitch, and I'm going to vote in committee for the institutional protections. And again, I don't think Mueller's going to be fired, but that's my position. I'll leave it up to Majority Leader how to run the floor.
Senator, so nothing in that briefing assuaged the concerns that you've been articulating for the past?
Everything in that briefing made me more worried, not less. This makes no sense to me. I don't know how in the world we can destroy ISIL relying on local police in a country that's dominated by Assad. How do the local forces maintain themselves? Are you going to partition Syria? And so this idea of local forces being able to hold the ground taken back from ISIS makes no sense when the Iraqi army couldn't do it without our help in Mosul. And when it comes to the malign influence of Iran, that's a goal, but I don't see any effective strategy. Seems to me that we're willing to give Syria to Assad, Russia, and Iran, and we're trying to find some way to leave Syria to keep ISIL destroyed, and I just don't see how that works, and I hope I'm wrong, but I am very unnerved by what I hear and what I see. And I think President Trump's been a good commander-in-chief, but when it comes to Syria, I think he's going down a very dangerous path. We saw the same movie in Iraq. What makes you think you're going to have a different outcome in Syria? Because you just have a different presence. And this military strike, I compliment those who delivered the strike, but I think it was a small price for Assad, not a big price. I think Assad, after this strike, believes that we're all tweet and no action. I think Russia and Iran is pretty convinced that we will not engage them in any fashion, contest them in Syria. So it's just a matter of time till Assad rolls throughout the entire country. And that, to me, is a nightmare for Israel and us. I'm not talking about a large number of American troops. I'm not talking about invading Syria, and I keep hearing that. It kind of just gets old. I'm talking about a strategy that Senator McCain put on the table 6 years ago. No-fly zone, safe haven, so people in Syria can live without being barrel bombed, that people can be trained to take Assad on, then we go to Geneva. The only outcome to solve this problem in Syria is in Geneva. It's not on the battlefield. But to think that you have any leverage under the current construct is insane. Why would Russia, Iran, and Assad go to Geneva when they're winning on the battlefield uncontested? How can you protect the Syrian Democratic Forces through diplomacy alone? Do you think Turkey is going to be dissuaded from attacking the Kurds when we leave? Every indication is that Turkey sees the Kurdish forces we align with more threatening to Turkey than ISIS. If you don't believe me, ask the president of Turkey. So we've got an ally who sees the Kurds a bigger threat to them than ISIS. To assume that this conflict will not arise when we leave is really naive. You got Iran who's setting up shop in Syria. And the question I asked the general and Secretary Mattis is, why is Israel bombing so much? Because they see a buildup of Iranian Hezbollah influence, and they're having to do it by themselves. So thank you.
Is the briefing over?
So I thought it was a very thorough briefing. They walked through the legal authorities that they had to conduct the strikes, laid out the decision-making process, and laid out how they view the future in Syria. I think, one of the comments we were talking about leaving was, I think we're all very thankful that Secretary Mattis is doing what he's doing. He's very sober, very direct, very transparent, and I think causes all of us to have a lot of confidence in his decision-making, along with General Dunford and others who were there. So a very good briefing. Outstanding.
Do you feel like the administration is prepared to stay in Syria for a long time?
No.
Is that been put to rest?
I think that these are public comments that I'm referring to, but and certainly reinforced by what just happened. I think the administration's plans are to complete the efforts against ISIS and to not be involved.
And what do you think? Is that a mistake?
Well, I think, what we said at the time, and, back when Russia came in, if you will, to guarantee that, the chemical weapons were not going to be utilized. Once that occurred and they began setting up defensive weaponry, it was over. I mean, Syria is Russia and Iran's now. They will be determining the future. We may be at the table, but when you're just talking and have nothing to do with shaping what's happening on the ground, you're just talking.
Did they talk specifically about what needs to happen before troops could be pulled back?
Yes, the complete elimination of ISIS, which we're doing through proxies, as you know, the Kurdish SDF, which Turkey is making life miserable for us now as they kill them. And we've got, to me, significant issues with Turkey in that regard and many others. But look, we've been working through proxy forces. Y'all know that. Our men and women are not in harm's way directly. We have lost a soldier. They've lost 4,000, the Kurds. But you know, I think the plan would be that we'll be there until we complete that activity, and then, as the president had said publicly, he does not want to be involved.
Was there any mention at all whether or not ISIS is regaining territory in Assad-controlled areas?
Again, I can refer to public information that you already have. They've got about a 5% hold on territory that they based 5% compared to what they once had. The fact that the Turks, unfortunately, are killing Kurds in Afrin has caused many of the SDF to move there, and so we really have hit sort of a stalemate right now with that remainder of 5%. And so we've got to reconstruct what's been happening and move against them to totally eliminate their, from a standpoint of holding territory. You're not going to totally eliminate them, but totally eliminate the territory that they're holding.
Was there any discussion of your AUMF as long as you had the secretary?
No. When you don't know what the answer is going to be, you don't ask the question. I'm just kidding you. But no, that would have been self-serving and not adding to the discussion about Syria.
Have you received any assurance from the majority leader about bringing your AUMF to the floor?
I haven't attempted to. It seems to me the first goal is to get it through committee with a substantial vote and have a discussion. I think to count your chickens before they're hatched, I mean, we know that if it doesn't pass through committee, there's nothing to talk about, and so I haven't attempted to do that. In the event that we're successful, there will be a conversation towards that end.
Do you want the administration to do more militarily to shape facts on the ground, or are you content?
They're not going to. I mean, look, I understand it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And to do so would take a significant effort on behalf of our own military. I don't think that's where the American people are right now. That was something that could have been done much more easily if we had not created the vacuum that we did there and let Russia and Iran step into it in the way they did. Once that decision was made, candidly, the die was cast as far as the future of Syria went.
What does this mean then for the influence of Iran in the country and Israel thereafter?
Thank you.
No problem. I haven't met him.
What do you think about him?
What I know about what he has been doing, I very much appreciate, and I appreciate the support he's given to us and our efforts. I appreciate his concerns about Iran and the nuclear agreement that we have. I appreciate the fact that France and the United Kingdom joined us in this effort. I am very, again, I've never met him, but I'm very pleased with the policies thus far that he has put forth relative to our relationship and the understandings that we have, and you know, just based on what I understand is happening inside of France itself. That's obviously none of my business, but it seems to me he's done a very good job of leading the country.
Some people say he can be arrogant.
Yeah,
what is your point of view?
Not knowing him, I wouldn't know, but it seems to me he's leading the country in a very good direction.
Senator McConnell specifically said to Fox, the Mueller protection bill, which you are an original author, is not going to be brought up on the U.S. Senate floor, period. He doesn't believe the president will fire Mueller, but it's not going to be on the floor.
A wide range of Republican leaders in the Senate agree that for President Trump to fire Bob Mueller or to interfere with his investigation would be a terrible idea. I think Chairman Grassley has called it politically suicidal. I think Senator Graham has said it would be effectively the end of the Trump presidency. And I believe Leader McConnell has also said sharply and pointedly the president should not do that. Those statements I all agree with. I don't know from where Leader McConnell gets his confidence that President Trump will not take action to interfere with this investigation, given the number of times in recent days that the president has tweeted or spoken directly or indirectly in ways that I think threaten the investigation being led by Special Counsel Mueller. I'm focused on making sure we get to a markup on the Judiciary Committee next Thursday, and that we're in a place for it to get past the Judiciary Committee. My hope is that Leader McConnell is correct in that we don't see a threat to Mueller's investigation by the president. But the reality here is that there are stronger and stronger signals that this president, who has acted in abrupt and unconventional and untraditional and unwise ways, may very well do exactly the same against Bob Mueller, and it would be wise for us to take it up and consider it.
Can you tell us what you on Syria? What did you hear in there, and what are your thoughts about it?
Of course, I can't tell you what. Senator,
what
you just left a classified briefing. Can you tell us what you heard in there? I think that answer is obvious.
What do you think about the president's policy on Syria right now?
The only thing worse than a bad plan on Syria is no plan on Syria, and the president and his administration have failed to deliver a coherent plan on the path forward. I think part of what may have encouraged Assad's forces to use chemical weapons again was President Trump's public statement that he intended to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria soon, just a few weeks ago, for him to then turn around and take proactive multilateral military action with our allies, the British and French, I think may have surprised Assad, his forces and his leadership. I think it's important for us to remain engaged in Syria and to pursue a diplomatic resolution. If we completely withdraw, our leverage in any diplomatic resolution or reconstruction or any hope for a post-Assad Syria goes away. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Just to follow up on that,